Friday mornings in Kampung Koporingan were usually calm. The air was soft and cool, carrying the scent of dew and earth. People moved slowly, aware of the blessing of a new day. For Mustofa, Friday was more than just the start of the weekend. It was a day for reflection and gratitude. That Friday, the 9th of January 2026, began like any other, but fate had a different plan. Mustofa woke up early, as usual, and saw his wife, Nur Shilla Abdullah, in the kitchen preparing breakfast. The sunlight poured through the small windows, highlighting her gentle movements. She was arranging plates, checking to make sure everything was neat, everything ready. Their children's well-being was always on her mind. Mustofa watched her quietly for a moment and felt a surge of love. Years of marriage had taught him that love was not always loud. It was in the quiet gestures, in the care that went unnoticed. "Are you ready for the school shopping today?" she asked, smiling without looking up. "Yes," he replied. "Chelsea needs shoes, and Alaqso's bag is already torn. We can't wait any longer." Nur Shilla chuckled softly, the sound warm and comforting. "It's just things, Mustofa, but you're right, they need them." The couple finished breakfast together. There was a sense of routine, of normalcy, but also of purpose. They were parents, and their children's needs guided every decision, every step. Mustofa checked his motorcycle while Nur Shilla packed the school supplies they had prepared for the day. It was a short list: notebooks, pencils, bags, and shoes. Yet each item carried a larger meaning, a commitment to their children's future, to their education, and to their happiness. Their firstborn, Putri Balqis Natasya, was 80 and in Indonesia, living with her grandmother. She could not be with them physically, but her parents thought of her often, praying for her safety and success. Putri Chelsea Diandra, 13, was at home, completing homework and dreaming about school. The youngest, Putra Alaqso, was just 8 years old, full of energy and curiosity, eager for his parents to return. The family had always been close-knit, relying on each other's love for strength. By mid-morning, Mustofa and Nur Shilla set out on their motorcycle toward Tamperuli. The journey was familiar: twisting roads, gentle slopes, and the occasional sharp bend. The sun had risen higher, and the road glimmered with warmth. They spoke quietly about chores, school, and family, savoring the moments of togetherness that everyday life often obscured. They reached the shop and selected the supplies carefully. Nur Shilla's hands lingered on the items, almost as if she could transfer love through touch. Mustofa paid, double-checking every purchase. The small errands filled their hearts with simple satisfaction. They mounted their motorcycle again, ready for the short ride home, unaware that this routine journey would become their last. As they approached Kampung Koporingan, a sharp bend appeared. It was a familiar curve, one they had navigated countless times. And yet, in that moment, a Ford Ranger Raptor appeared, overtaking recklessly. The motorcycle had no chance. The impact was sudden, violent, and absolute. Both Mustofa and Nur Shilla were killed instantly, leaving behind the world they loved and the children who needed them. The school supplies scattered on the road bore silent witness to a family's love cut short. By the time news spread, the lives of 3 children had changed forever. In an instant, laughter, guidance, and parental protection vanished. Putri Chelsea and Putra Alaqso were left in the quiet of their home, struggling to comprehend a reality without their parents. Far away, Putri Balqis received the call that would shatter her heart. She wanted to return immediately, but passport issues prevented her from traveling. Distance now separated her from the grief she longed to share and the siblings she longed to embrace. Prayers and tears flowed freely as the community came together. Yet, no apology or condolence came from the driver responsible for the crash. The emptiness, the injustice, and the sorrow compounded the tragedy. And so, on a seemingly ordinary Friday, Mustofa and Nur Shilla left the world hand in hand. Their journey home had ended, but the love they carried, their care, their guidance, and their devotion remained as a quiet, enduring presence for their children. The house in Kampung Koporingan had never felt so quiet. It was the same house the children had always known, But now the warmth that came from their parents' presence was gone. The familiar hum of conversation, the laughter over breakfast, the gentle scolding over homework, everything had disappeared in an instant. Silence filled the rooms, heavy and unyielding. Putri Chelsea Diandra was the first to sense that something was wrong that afternoon. Her parents were late, far later than usual. The clock ticked loudly, almost painfully, in the quiet kitchen. She waited, glancing toward the door again and again, hoping to hear the familiar sound of her mother's footsteps or her father's voice calling her name. But nothing came. Her younger brother, Putra Alaqso, played quietly on the floor with his toy cars, lining them up in neat rows. Every few minutes, he looked toward the door, his small face hopeful and puzzled. "Mama, Papa?" he asked softly, his voice hesitant. Chelsea forced a smile, trying to reassure him, but inside her heart, a heavy worry was taking root. The call came later that evening. It was brief, almost clinical, yet it carried a weight that would change their lives forever. Mustofa and Nur Shilla Abdullah had died in a road accident. The motorcycle they were riding had collided with a Ford Ranger Raptor at a sharp bend in Kampung Koporingan. The impact was fatal. Both parents were gone. Chelsea's knees weakened. She collapsed onto the floor as reality hit. She could still hear her mother's voice in her memory, gentle and full of love. "Be patient, my girl. Everything will be worth it." But now, everything seemed meaningless. The world had turned upside down in an instant. Putra Alaqso didn't cry at first. He didn't fully understand what death meant. All he knew was that his parents were not coming home. "When will Mama wake up?" he asked, his small voice trembling. Chelsea hugged him tightly, feeling the unbearable weight of responsibility settle upon her young shoulders. She was only 13, yet now she had to care for her little brother, comfort him through his confusion and grief, and try to remain strong for him. Across the sea in Indonesia, their eldest sister, Putri Balqis Natasya, received the same devastating news. She screamed until her chest ached, the phone slipping from her hands as tears streamed down her face. Her grandmother held her tightly, trying to calm her while mourning the loss herself. Balqis wanted to leave immediately, to be with her siblings, to see her parents one last time, to hold them and cry, but life was cruel. Passport issues delayed her return, trapping her far away from the family she loved so deeply. Each hour of delay felt like a punishment. Meanwhile, in Sabah, the community came together to support the children. Neighbors, relatives, and friends tried to fill the empty house with comfort. But nothing could replace the warmth of the parents' presence. Meals were prepared, chores were done, and yet the laughter that had always filled the rooms was gone. The house was full of bodies, but empty of voices. Empty of the love that had guided these children through the small joys and troubles of everyday life. At the funeral, Mustofa and Nur Shilla were laid to rest side by side. The cemetery was quiet, the soil soft and solemn under the morning sun. People whispered prayers, recited Al-Fatiha, and shared memories of a couple who had devoted their lives to their children. Yet, even in this moment of mourning, a painful absence lingered. The driver responsible for the crash had not reached out, had not offered an apology, had not expressed the simplest human act of regret. The grief was heavier for that silence, for the injustice that accompanied the tragedy. For Chelsea and Alaqso, life changed in ways they could not have imagined. They could not play freely, could not argue over small matters, could not share stories before bedtime. Every moment carried a reminder that their parents were gone. Every corner of the house held a memory, every sound, every object, a whisper of a world that no longer existed. And yet, even in their grief, they found moments of resilience. Chelsea began to step into her mother's role, quietly guiding her younger brother, preparing meals, and trying to maintain a sense of normalcy in a home that felt anything but normal. Across the miles, Balqis's heart ached. She could only imagine her siblings' sorrow and her parents' absence. She promised herself she would return to them as soon as she could, to share in the mourning, to help shoulder the burden, and to ensure that her parents' love and values would continue to guide the family. The house in Kampung Bengal remained quiet that night, but it was not empty. It was filled with the invisible presence of love, of memories, and of the parents who had given everything for their children. Even in their absence, Mustofa and Nur Shilla had left a legacy, one that their children would carry forward, even as they navigated the unbearable silence left behind. Putri Balqis Natasya sat on the floor of her small room in Indonesia, the phone still clutched in her trembling hands. The words she had heard replayed in her mind endlessly. Your parents are gone. She could not breathe. She could not think. She could not understand how life could take them both away in an instant. Her mother Nur Shilla, with her warm smile and gentle hands. Her father, Mustofa, with his calm voice and steady presence. They were gone, and she was far away, helpless, trapped by distance, by bureaucracy, by the cruel limits of reality. Balqis wanted to run, to catch the next flight, to hold her siblings, to bury herself in the arms of her parents one last time. But her passport issues delayed her departure. Every moment she spent away from her family felt unbearable, a mixture of guilt and helplessness that pressed on her chest. She could not stop the tears from streaming, and yet she tried to stay strong, knowing that her younger siblings, Chelsea and Alaqso, needed someone to hold them up in this dark time. At home in Kampung Bengal, Chelsea had already begun to step into her mother's role, though she was only 13. She had no choice. She had to comfort Alaqso, who kept asking the same questions over and over again. When will Mama come back? Where is Papa? Why are they not here? Each question stabbed at Chelsea's heart, a reminder of the responsibility suddenly placed upon her shoulders. She cooked simple meals, helped Alaqso with his homework, and held him at night when nightmares made him cry. Each task was a burden, but she bore it silently, afraid that her own grief would only worsen her brother's pain. Chelsea had to be strong, but it was exhausting. There were moments when she would sit alone in her room, holding back sobs, allowing herself a few stolen minutes of despair. She missed her mother's laughter, her father's gentle guidance, the way they had always made life feel safe, and she feared the days ahead, uncertain how they could continue without the people who had always been the center of their world. Meanwhile, Balqis was consumed by her own guilt and sorrow. She remembered every memory with her parents, the way her father taught her to ride a bicycle, the way her mother brushed her hair before school, the small advice and encouragements they had given her without pause. And now, she felt powerless. She could not be there to comfort her siblings. She could not be there to say goodbye. The distance was a cruel reminder of how fragile life could be, and how quickly it could change. The family in Sabah worked tirelessly to bring Balqis home. They navigated paperwork, contacted authorities, and arranged flights. The promise was clear. She would join them for the 40 days of mourning, a sacred period when prayers are offered, tears are shed, and memories are shared. It was the first light of hope in what had been a suffocating darkness. Finally, after days of waiting, arrangements were made. Balqis would return to Sabah to grieve alongside her siblings, to see her parents' resting place, and to feel the physical closeness that had been denied to her. In the meantime, Chelsea continued to hold her brother and the household together. She forced herself to smile for Alaqso's sake, even when her own heart was breaking. She became a mother figure before she was even a teenager, learning the ways of patience, comfort, and strength. Every meal she prepared, every homework she guided, every bedtime story she read, was an act of love in memory of the parents they had lost. The house remained quiet and heavy, but it was filled with invisible threads of love. Mustofa and Nur Shilla's presence lingered in every corner of the kitchen where Nur Shilla had prepared meals, the living room where Mustofa had read the newspaper, the small moments of laughter that now lived only in memory. These threads of love were fragile, but unbroken. They gave the children a foundation, however thin, upon which to rebuild their lives. Balqis, sitting alone in Indonesia, held on to the hope of reunion. She wrote letters to her parents' graves, even from afar, whispering her regrets, her longing, and her promises. She imagined holding her siblings in her arms, whispering comfort into Chelsea's ear, and stroking Alaqso's hair until his tears stopped. and she promised herself that once she returned, she would be the support her family needed, the presence they had lost, and the bridge that kept her parents' love alive. The days passed slowly, each one marked by longing and grief. Balqis counted them carefully, her heart aching with every passing hour. And yet, in her heart, she held on to hope, the hope that soon she would be home, that she would be with her siblings, and that together, they could honor their parents' love and memory, even in the face of unbearable loss. The day Putri Balqis Natasya finally arrived in Sabah was heavy with emotion. The airport felt colder than she remembered, the bustling crowd a blur as her heart raced with anticipation and fear. She scanned the arrivals hall, eyes searching desperately for her siblings. When she saw Chelsea and Alaqso waiting, she broke down completely. 13-year-old Chelsea and 8-year-old Alaqso ran toward her, their small bodies colliding with hers in a tangle of sobs and arms. All three of them cried without restraint, each tear carrying months of longing, guilt, and sorrow. Balqis held them tightly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She had promised herself she would come as soon as she could, but the delay had tormented her. Now that she was here, nothing else mattered except being with her siblings, comforting them, and finding a way to navigate the grief that had overtaken their lives. The first visit was to their parents' graves. Balqis knelt beside Mustofa and Nur Shilla, placing her hands gently on the cold earth. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I promise I will take care of Chelsea and Alaqso. I will protect them, just like Mama and Papa did." The words were almost a prayer, carrying both her sorrow and her commitment. Chelsea and Alaqso clung to her sides, their tiny hands grasping hers, and together they whispered Al-Fatiha for the parents who had shaped their lives so completely. The 40 days that followed were filled with ritual, reflection, and relentless grief. Each day began with prayer, neighbors and extended family visiting to share memories, and stories of Mustofa and Nur Shilla's kindness, generosity, and devotion to their children. These stories were a balm for the children's hearts, but they could not replace the physical presence of their parents. Every day Balqis tried to hold Chelsea and Alaqso together, guiding them, comforting them, and sharing her own tears in private. Chelsea, though still grieving, began to step into her mother's role more fully. She helped Alaqso with school, prepared simple meals, and even guided him through the routines of their household. Alaqso, in turn, clung to both sisters, seeking comfort in their presence while learning to face a world without his parents' protection. The grief was raw, unending, but slowly, tiny moments of healing appeared. Balqis watched her siblings carefully. She knew that the pain would not vanish, not in 40 days or 40 years. But she also understood that love their parents' love could survive even death. Every kind word, every lesson, every bedtime story they shared was a continuation of Mustofa and Nur Shilla's legacy. Balqis felt a fierce determination to ensure that their children, though broken, would never be lost. She would carry their parents' values and spirit forward, even if it meant sacrificing her own comfort and youth. Outside the house, the community quietly offered support. Neighbors brought food, relatives helped with chores, and prayers were said constantly. The children were surrounded by love, yet the emptiness in their hearts could only be filled with memories of their parents. They spoke often about the smallest details: Nur Shilla's gentle laughter, Mustafa's steady voice, the way they held their hands when comforting them. These memories became the threads that kept their family bound together. Balqis also faced her own emotions. She had waited so long to be with her siblings, and yet every moment reminded her of her parents' absence. Nights were the hardest. She would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, remembering the smiles, the advice, and the simple moments of her parents' care. She whispered apologies to them, as if the prayers and words could somehow reach beyond the grave. She promised to guide her siblings through this tragedy, to be strong where her parents could no longer be, and to keep their love alive in every action she took. The 40 days were a journey of grief, but also of connection. By the end of the period, the siblings had begun to adjust, not to forget, not to replace, but to survive. Together, they had cried, prayed, and remembered. They had learned that even in the deepest sorrow, family could hold them up. Mustofa and Nur Shilla were gone, but their love remained, woven into the daily lives of their children, guiding them through the quiet hours and the small victories of life. In the midst of unbearable loss, the three siblings discovered resilience, courage, and the power of love. And in their hearts, they knew that their parents' presence would never truly leave them. It would live on in every word, every gesture, and every decision they made in the years to come. Time passed slowly in Kampung Koporingan. After the 40 days of mourning, the house that had once echoed with laughter was still quieter than it had been. Yet the children had begun to find small ways to navigate life without their parents. The grief remained, heavy and persistent, but it had begun to take a new shape that included memory, love, and the unspoken guidance of Mustofa and Nur Shilla. Putri Balqis Natasya, the eldest, had stepped into her new role with quiet determination. Though she was still grieving, she had become a second mother to her younger siblings. She prepared meals, helped with schoolwork, and comforted Putra Alaqso when nightmares woke him in the night. She listened patiently to Chelsea's worries, offered gentle guidance, and reminded her siblings that even though their parents were gone, they were not alone. Every act of care was her way of keeping her parents' legacy alive. Chelsea, now more mature than her years suggested, continued to take on responsibilities that once belonged to her mother. She taught Alaqso's small lessons about kindness, patience, and courage, the very qualities their mother had nurtured in them. She still cried sometimes, holding her pillow tightly at night. But she also smiled when Alaqso laughed, finding moments of joy amidst sorrow. Every day, she learned that life, even after heartbreak, could continue, and that the love of a family could endure. Alaqso, the youngest, remained innocent and playful, yet he carried a quiet strength that reflected the love of both his parents. He would sometimes ask questions that were too hard for a child to ask. Will Mama and Papa ever come back? Or do they know I miss them? Balqis and Chelsea answered as best as they could, speaking gently, reassuring him that their parents' love was always with them, even if they could not see them. And slowly, Alaqso began to understand, in his own way, that love does not vanish with death. It transforms into memory, guidance, and an invisible presence that can carry a family through the darkest days. The siblings often sat together in the evenings, talking about their parents, recalling small gestures that had once seemed ordinary but now felt extraordinary. They remembered Mustofa's calm voice during difficult times, Nur Shilla's laughter while preparing meals, the way they had always placed their children's needs above their own. These memories became a source of strength, a foundation upon which they could build their new lives. Balqis took special care to teach Chelsea and Alaqso the values their parents had instilled in them: honesty, kindness, patience, and love. She reminded them constantly that while their parents could no longer guide them in person, their teachings would always remain. Through Balqis's dedication, the siblings began to realize that they could carry their parents' legacy forward in every choice they made, every act of compassion, and every small victory they achieved. Community support remained crucial during this time. Neighbors, relatives, and friends continued to check on the children, offering help where needed. They shared stories of Mustofa and Nur Shilla, reminding the siblings that their parents' impact reached far beyond the home. These stories became lessons as well, lessons in integrity, generosity, and love. The children listened carefully, absorbing every word, every memory, every detail that connected them to the parents they had lost. Even as life slowly regained a rhythm, the pain of loss never fully disappeared. The siblings learned to live with it, to carry it with them like a silent companion that reminded them of the depth of their love and the importance of their family bond. Every decision, every moment of strength, every kind act became a tribute to their parents' memory. Mustofa and Nur Shilla had left behind no riches or wealth, but what they left was far more enduring. They had left children raised with love, values, and resilience. They had created a legacy of courage, care, and devotion that no tragedy could erase. Their presence continued to guide their children, not in body, but in spirit, in every act of kindness. in every lesson remembered, in every choice that reflected the values they had instilled. The three siblings, Balqis, Chelsea, and Alaqso, grew together, leaning on one another, finding strength in shared grief and shared love. They realized that even in the absence of their parents, life could be meaningful, beautiful, and full of hope. The love of Mustofa and Nur Shilla remained a constant, quiet force, carrying them forward into a future that, though uncertain, would always be grounded in the enduring power of family. Gone together on a Friday, Mustofa and Nur Shilla had left a legacy that death could not take. Their children would live, grow, and thrive, guided by the lessons, the love, and the memories of the parents who had given everything. And in every tear, every prayer, every act of kindness, their presence remained silent, eternal, and unbreakable. Alpha